During World War II in the Swedish city of Malmö, a boy named Steve was completing his studies at a school. He had moved there with his family. At his school, a new teacher named Layla had joined, and all the kids were happy to see her. She tried to quiet them down, but no one was listening. The kids were having fun during their free period, and Steve was doing what the rest of the boys were doing. He had written various things about the girls on a piece of paper and was sharing it with others. But on her very first day, Layla saw Steve doing this. She didn't say anything to him in front of the class, but called him outside afterward and asked him to solve some questions. Since he hadn't paid attention in class, he couldn't solve them, so Layla took the paper from his hands and read it. She was shocked by what was written on it. After everyone had left, she gave Steve the punishment of cleaning the entire classroom. During this time, Steve started getting attracted to Layla's beauty. He didn't know whether it was right or wrong, but he just kept looking at her. After a while, Layla also realized that Steve was staring at her, so she told him to go home. At home, we learned that Steve's brother Shag was a boxer and was soon going to leave for army duty. Steve was eagerly waiting for him. In the evenings, Steve worked at a movie theater. His boss wasn't very happy with him because he was often late, but Steve always managed to come up with some excuse. The next day, when Steve came to school, Layla was seen walking around near him during a test, which made him feel very awkward. Layla was doing this intentionally. Later that day, when Steve went to the theater again, Shag showed up there to surprise him, but Steve told him not to come there again as he didn't want any family member to see him at work. He asked him to go home. After Steve's shift ended, he started heading home. Along the way, we see a girl named Elizabeth who liked Steve a lot, but Steve didn't really like her that much, and he ignored her every time. Elizabeth didn't like it. She had even started learning his language to impress him, but at this time, Steve's mind was entirely occupied with thoughts of Layla. When he got home, his brother spent a lot of time with him as he was soon leaving for the army. Steve told his brother about his teacher, Layla. He shared all his heart's secrets only with him. His brother advised, if she's on your mind so much, you should talk to her. Taking that advice to heart, Steve went to school the next day. After class, he began asking Layla questions, trying to impress her. He knew she'd always answer them. Later, when he went to help put some boxes away, he felt closer to Layla than ever before. It was a special moment. Something stirred inside him, a different kind of energy he had never felt. During the sports period, while all the other kids were busy playing games, Steve's eyes were searching only for Layla. His fascination wasn't limited to the classroom. He even went to her house in his free time, just to catch a glimpse of her. Layla had begun to notice what Steve felt for her, and slowly she too started to feel drawn toward him. One day when Layla went upstairs at school to get something, Steve quietly followed her, but when Layla noticed him behind her, she didn't seem upset. That's when Steve got the chance he had been waiting for. They kissed for the first time. Layla then went further upstairs, and there, once again, they came close. But suddenly, someone else appeared. Startled, they left quickly. After that incident, Steve started behaving very strangely. He began touching things Layla had touched. He even kissed the chair she sat on every day. His friends saw him doing this and asked, "Why were you smelling the chair?" Steve made up an excuse and walked away. One day, when planes were being prepared for war and the school kids had gathered to watch them take off, Steve didn't go. Instead, he left everything behind and went straight to Layla's house. He stood at the door, nervous, unsure how Layla would react to seeing him. Still, he gathered his courage and rang the bell. Layla opened the door and without saying a word, let him inside. That day, they made love for the first time. They sat together afterward and talked for hours. Layla gently told Steve, "Don't come to my house every day. I'm a married woman. My husband could show up at any time. Come only when I ask you to." Steve didn't mind. He was willing to follow all her rules. One day, Layla called Steve over, but not long after he arrived, her husband Frank came home. Steve quickly ran and tried to hide, but Frank saw him. Frank assumed Steve was just one of Layla's students who had come for some tutoring. He didn't say anything and quietly left the house. Layla felt very bad too. She thought maybe Frank had found out everything, but that wasn't the case. Despite all this, it didn't create any rift in their relationship. Whenever they got a chance, Steve and Layla would meet. With time, they grew even closer. During class, they would exchange glances and smile at each other. After school ended, they would meet again. This had now become normal, but one day, there was a Boxing Day match. that Sek was going to fight his final match, because after that he was leaving for the army. Steve finished up his theater work and rushed to watch the boxing match, where Sek got badly beaten. Both of them returned home. Sek's face was in bad shape, but that night the two brothers stayed up talking a lot, knowing that Sek would leave for the army the next morning. In the middle of the night, so Steve couldn't sleep because of his dad's loud snoring. He quietly went over to Layla's house. He had a key to her home, so he unlocked the gate and walked in. He assumed Frank wouldn't be there that night, but Frank was there. Frank saw Steve again, but because he was half asleep, he didn't recognize him. Once again, Steve escaped being caught. On Layla's birthday, Steve brought her a present. There, he once again ran into Frank, but Frank didn't say anything because he still didn't know the truth about Steve. Frank and Steve started talking and even became friends because their thoughts and views were quite similar. Frank started opening up to him. He talked about a lot of songs he used to enjoy with his friends. Steve really liked this new friendship, so he started spending more time with Frank, though he continued his romantic relationship with Layla. One day, Frank came home and found Steve there. They sat together, talked, and even shared a drink. Frank was a good person, but his drinking habits made his wife dislike him. As Steve left, he took some of Frank's music CDs home with him and started playing them, but when Steve's dad heard those songs, he immediately came and turned them off. One day, Steve went to Layla's house and started making love to her. Just then, Frank walked in. Steve panicked when he saw him, but Frank calmly said, "Don't worry, I know about the love between you and my wife. I've known everything for a while, but I never said a word." Steve tried to defend himself, but Frank stopped him and began telling his own story. "When I got married, I used to sleep with someone else. And one day, Layla found out. Since then, she hasn't treated me the same because I betrayed her. That's when I started drinking and made it my only escape." All this was quite strange for Steve, even upsetting in some way. He was still very young and he didn't quite know how to process that and everything. Meanwhile, Elizabeth had also started learning the language gradually, hoping to impress Steve. But Elizabeth's friend advised her that boys don't get impressed by such things. She'd have to try something else. Now that Sek had joined the army, his letters brought joy to Steve. Reading them made him very happy. Steve wrote back to Sek, telling him about the conditions here. Steve and Frank started meeting regularly. They would listen to their favorite songs together. Steve began trying to explain to Frank that alcohol had destroyed his life. If things continued this way, Frank would die soon. Steve insisted that he needed to cut back on drinking. Frank actually listened to Steve and began adopting better habits. A week later, the farewell day arrived. Elizabeth took Steve to her home, and there she presented herself in front of him dressed up. But Steve refused to make love to her, telling her that he didn't love her. This broke Elizabeth's heart, and she started crying. One day, Steve told Layla that if she liked him, she should be with him. But Layla replied that if she left Frank, he would start drinking again, and so she couldn't leave Frank. Meanwhile, in America, riots had broken out, and Frank's business collapsed. As a result, he started drinking again. When Steve heard about this, he went to try to convince Frank to stop drinking again, but Frank was unwilling to stop. Steve suggested that he think about starting another business. Despite being younger in age, Steve spoke with the maturity of someone Frank's age. After a while, when Frank fell asleep, Layla came to Steve and asked him to come with her, but Steve didn't want to betray Frank, so he left Layla and walked away. Layla felt hurt that Steve was going away from her. The next day in class, Steve didn't speak much to Layla, and this started to affect her deeply. Layla tried hard to get closer to Steve, but he kept his distance. Then Steve went directly to the girls' changing room where he met Elizabeth in secret. The two got close. Elizabeth still didn't know about Steve and Layla. She was just happy that Steve was now with her. One day when Steve was home, he received a telegram. It said that the submarine his brother was on was attacked last night and that his brother had died. Steve couldn't bear the shock and broke down in tears. However, he didn't tell his mother anything, but after a while, she sensed something was wrong. They both sat and cried together. Steve tried to console her, saying that the ship was still being searched and maybe his brother was still alive. But the reality was that no one had survived on that ship. Meanwhile, Layla was going mad with anger at not being able to meet Steve. She decided to go to the theater where Steve worked to see him. That day, Elizabeth was also at the theater looking for Steve. She saw him with Layla, and when she realized what was going on, she left heartbroken. Outside, Steve tried hard to explain everything to her, but she refused to listen to anything. The next day, Steve went to Layla's house. He told her that he wanted to end their relationship, but Layla, lost in her drunken stupor, began acting hysterically upon hearing Steve's words, hurting herself in distress. Steve had no choice but to stay in the relationship to calm things down. A few days later, while all the students were at school, Layla told Steve that he had failed. Steve immediately understood why she was doing this, because he wanted to break up with her. He tried to talk to her, but Layla refused to listen. She wanted things to return to the way they were before, but Steve didn't want to make the same mistake again. In frustration, Steve kicked a desk, which led to him being summoned by the principal. The principal told him that he would have to repeat the year. An entire year wasted. Shocked and panicked, Steve ran to the classroom and began searching through the registers for his marks. But the pages had been torn out by Layla. Now desperate, he went straight to Frank, hoping he could talk to Layla and convince her to pass him. But Frank was completely drunk and refused to listen to anything. One day, the principal came to the class and took Steve with him because news had just arrived about his brother. A few days later, the funeral was held for the soldier. The entire family was there. On the way back, Steve's mother assumed that he had failed because he had been working nights. Steve told her, "It's not what you think. When I grow up, I'll tell you the real reason." Then he went to comfort his father, who was completely broken by the loss of his son. The story moves forward. A few days later, the results were announced at school. One by one, students were given their results. When it was Steve's turn, he did something in front of everyone that made Layla deeply ashamed. He left the school without even taking his results. Layla, humiliated and disturbed by what happened, was left shaken. Meanwhile, Steve went back, collected all his books, and left, determined to focus on himself and prove his worth. And with that, the story comes to an end.